grim darkness of the far future. We watch.
There are forces in the universe that even the warp cannot fully comprehend. Powers that exist outside the Chaos God's eternal game. Tonight's story asks a question that should never be answered. What happens when a spirit of vengeance enters the 41st millennium, a galaxy where literally everyone is guilty of something? The Underhive of Malum Primus was already a place where hope went to die. 12 billion souls crammed into rusted hab blocks that hadn't seen maintenance since the age of apostasy. Gang warfare, corpse starch riots, the usual miseries of Imperial life at the bottom of the pyramid. But on the night of the festival of the Emperor's Ascension, something new descended into those polluted depths. Something that rode through the darkness on a machine that screamed with chains and hellfire. Inquisitor Cassian Voke had seen many horrors in his 40 years of service. He'd burned heretics on a dozen worlds, banished demons back to the warp, and survived 2 encounters with the ruinous powers that left his mind scarred and his faith tested. But when the Vox transmission came through from Precinct 77 Gamma, he felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: genuine confusion. "Repeat that last part," Voke said into his comm bead, standing in the sanctum of his orbital vessel. The scratchy voice of Arbite's Captain Thorn came through again. "My Lord Inquisitor, the witnesses are consistent. A figure, burning, writing something that our tech priests cannot classify. It hunted down the Red Vipers gang, all 43 members. They were found burned from the inside out. But my lord, the scorch patterns, they match nothing in our archives. Not promethium, not plasma, not even warp fire." Voke's servo skull, Matthias, bobbed near his shoulder, its auger sensors clicking. "Warp contamination detected in the area?" Voke asked. "That's the disturbing part, my lord. The readings are inverted. Where the creature passed, warp presence decreased, as if it was purging corruption rather than spreading it. If you crave more tales where the impossible collides with the grim darkness of the far future, smash that subscribe button. The Emperor protects those who support the channel, because what Inquisitor Voke was about to discover would challenge everything the Imperium understood about the nature of damnation itself." Within 6 hours, Voke was planetside with his retinue. Interrogator Sarn, his psychic advisor. Sister Superior Helene of the Order of the Bloody Rose. 4 crusaders in carapace armor. They descended into the Underhive in a Valkyrie gunship, its searchlights cutting through the perpetual smog that choked the lower levels. The crime scene was in Sector 77, a maze of corrugated metal corridors and jury-rigged power conduits where the Red Vipers had made their territory. The gang had controlled the local narcotics trade, Obscura, Calma, Frenzon, the usual miseries of Imperial life at the bottom of the pyramid. But on the night of the festival of the Emperor's Ascension, something new descended into those polluted depths. Something that rode through the darkness on a machine that screamed with chains and hellfire. "Emperor preserve us," Sister Helene whispered, making the sign of the Aquila. Her helmet lenses swept across the carnage. The bodies were positioned where they'd fallen, but they weren't simply burned. Their flesh had been consumed from within, skeletal remains frozen in expressions of absolute terror. Scorch marks radiated outward in patterns that looked almost like chains. The walls showed massive gouges, as if something with incredible heat and force had torn through metal like parchment. Interrogator Sarn knelt beside one corpse, his psychic hood humming with power as he extended his senses. His eyes went wide. "My lord, this man, I can still feel the echo of his last moments. He saw every sin he'd ever committed, every murder, every rape, every act of cruelty, all at once. The pain didn't kill him, the guilt did. Guilt? Vok's voice was sharp. In the Underhive, these animals don't feel guilt. They did when they looked into its eyes, Sarn said, standing shakily. Whatever this entity is, it judges, and its judgment is absolute. A tech priest emerged from the shadows, his macadendrites clicking nervously. Lord Inquisitor, we found something. He led them deeper into the gang's territory, to what had been their throne room, a converted water treatment chamber decorated with trophies of their victims. There, burned into a metal wall 3 meters high, was a symbol, a flaming skull, chain patterns radiating outward, and beneath it, high Gothic words that seemed to smoke even now. The guilty burn. Innocence is no shield from judgment. Vok stared at the inscription, his mind racing through decades of theological training and xenological study. This wasn't chaos. Chaos corrupted, tempted, promised power. This was something else, something that punished. And in a galaxy where humanity's crimes could fill libraries, a judge that could not be bargained with or corrupted was perhaps the most terrifying thing imaginable. Lock down this sector, Vok commanded. No one in or out, and find this thing. Whatever it is, it's operating in Imperial territory without sanction. That makes it a threat. But even as he gave the order, Vok felt the weight of uncertainty. In the 41st millennium, where evil was so commonplace it had become doctrine, where billions died daily in the Emperor's name, where the Imperium itself was built on mountains of corpses, what would happen when something that judged the guilty turned its attention to those in power? In the darkness of the Underhive, something waited. Something with a skull wrapped in flames and eyes that saw every sin. And it had only just begun. The warp stirred. In the Imperium, where thought becomes reality and emotion feeds gods, something unprecedented occurred. The Chaos Powers, ancient, infinite, eternally hungry, felt a presence that should not exist. A burning light that was neither the Corpse Emperor's fading beacon nor the glory of the ruinous powers. It was something older, something primal, and it was hunting in their garden. On the demon world of Sikaris, Apostle Marduk of the Word-Bearers knelt before his scrying chamber, 8 circles of warding carved into the stone around him. His patron had sent visions, trebling visions. The dark gods were curious. "Show me," Marduk commanded, slicing his palm and letting blood drip onto the obsidian mirror before him. The surface rippled, images formed. A figure riding through the Underhive of Malum Primus on a machine that defied the laws of reality, part motorcycle, part demon engine, yet serving neither the Omnissiah nor the Dark Mechanicum. Chains of hellfire, a skull wreathed in flames that burned with colors that had no names in any human language. But it was what happened next that made even the Apostles' corrupt heart skip a beat. The rider had found a cult, a small cell of corn worshippers, 16 souls who dedicated themselves to the blood god through murder and sacrifice. They'd killed 37 people in the Emperor's name, then 37 more in corns, playing both sides as the Underhive burned. The rider had looked at them, just looked, and they had burned. But not with the cleansing fire of the ecclesiarchy or the consuming flames of Tsinch. They burned from the inside out, their sins made manifest, their demon mark screaming as it was seared from their very souls before those souls were consumed entirely. "Impossible," Marduk whispered. "The marks of the dark gods cannot be removed. Once given, they are eternal." The vision showed more. A Drater demon of Slanesh, drawn by the commotion, had manifested in the Underhive to investigate. The demon had approached the rider with its usual confidence. These mortals always break, always beg, always eventually succumb to sensation. The rider had turned its burning gaze upon the demon, the penitent stare. Even through the scrying mirror, Marduk felt the echo of what the demon experienced. Every soul it had tortured, every innocent it had corrupted, every scream of anguish it had caused across 10,000 years of existence, all reflected back in an instant, all felt simultaneously. The demon hadn't just been banished, it had been judged, found wanting, and its essence scattered across the warp itself, potentially forever. Marduk stood up abruptly, his ornate armor creaking. This changed everything. The Chaos Gods had spent millennia learning the patterns of this galaxy. The Imperium served the Corpse Emperor through fear and faith. The Eldar clung to their dying civilization. The Orcs lived for war. The Tau believed in their greater good. All of them could be corrupted, tempted, or destroyed through understood mechanisms. But this spirit of vengeance answered to no god, made no bargains, could not be corrupted because it fed on corruption itself. It was an equation that didn't balance, a piece that didn't fit the game board. He needed to report this to his superiors, but more importantly, he needed to understand it. Across the galaxy, in the Eye of Terror itself, the Despoiler paused mid-strategy session. Abaddon the Despoiler, War Master of Chaos, felt something he hadn't experienced since his duel with Sigismund: uncertainty. His sorcerers had brought him reports, fragmentary, contradictory, but consistent in one regard. Something was hunting Chaos cultists with a precision and effectiveness that rivaled the Grey Knights, but without any of the Imperium's usual limitations. No need for supplies, no risk of corruption, just absolute, unwavering judgment. "What is it?" Abaddon demanded, his voice echoing through the throne room of the vengeful spirit. His chief diviner, a former Thousand-Sun sorcerer named Iskander Kion's lesser student, prostrated himself. "Lord Warmaster, our readings suggest an entity from beyond our reality, not from the warp, not from real space, something that exists in the spaces between, a spirit of vengeance that predates even the war in heaven. Can it be killed? Unknown, Lord, but it can be encountered. It hunts those who sin, and in the 41st millennium..." The sorcerer's voice trailed off nervously. Abaddon understood immediately. In a galaxy where the Imperium committed genocide as policy, where Chaos Marines butchered worlds for sport, where every faction was guilty of atrocities that would make ancient Terra's worst tyrants weep, a judge that could not be bargained with was a threat to everyone. "Then we test it," Abaddon declared. "Send word to the cults on Malum Primus. I want warbands converging on that world. If this rider judges sin, let's see how it handles an entire planet's worth of damnation. And if it can be broken, corrupted, or destroyed, we'll learn that too." Back on Malum Primus, Inquisitor Voke was discovering the same problem from the opposite perspective. His investigation had uncovered 17 more incidents in the past 48 hours. The writer was moving through the Underhive with purpose, targeting specific individuals and groups. A corrupt Arbites captain who'd been taking bribes and selling confiscated weapons to gangs, burned to ash in his precinct office. A merchant prince who'd been trafficking children to off-world slave rings, found in his mansion, his bodyguards untouched, but the prince himself reduced to a smoking skeleton. A rogue psyker who'd been feeding off the terror of kidnapped victims, hunted down in the waste processing levels, and judged. The pattern was clear. The writer wasn't random hunting. It was following a trail of guilt and corruption that led straight up through every level of this hive. And my lord Shaleni approached him, her face troubled. "We need to discuss something." The governor's palace has requested our immediate withdrawal. They claim our investigation is disrupting planetary tithes." Vok's eyes narrowed. The governor is worried about tithes when there's a supernatural entity burning people alive in his underhive? That's what concerns me, my lord. I ran a background investigation. Governor Callis has been in power for 20 years. His administration has been remarkably profitable for him personally. The implication hung in the air like smoke. If the writer was hunting the corrupt and guilty, and it was moving up through the hive social strata, then eventually... He's afraid, Vok realized. The governor knows what he's done, and he knows judgment is coming. Still with us in the darkness? Hit that like button if this tale chills your soul, because what happens next will test the very foundations of imperial authority. Interrogator Sarn burst into the command center, his psychic hood sparking. "My lord, I've been tracking the writer's pattern. It's not random hunting, it's following a trail of guilt and corruption that leads straight up through every level of this hive. And my lord, the end point is the governor's palace. It's going to judge everyone. The gangers, the merchants, the arbites, the nobles, and when it runs out of targets there..." He didn't need to finish. Vok understood perfectly. In a galaxy built on brutality and oppression, where the Imperium itself was humanity's greatest monster, a spirit of vengeance that judged the guilty wouldn't stop at gang members and corrupt officials. It would burn its way through every level of imperial society until it reached the very top. And in the 41st millennium, everyone, from the lowest hiveganger to the High Lords of Terra themselves, was guilty of something. The question wasn't whether the writer would judge them. The question was whether anyone would survive that judgment. The hunt began in earnest at the stroke of midnight, when Malum Primus's failing generators dimmed the hive's lights to their lowest ebb. Inquisitor Vok had assembled a strike team, 20 veteran guardsmen, Sister Helene's Soroteris squad, and a full complement of servo skulls equipped with pict recorders. If they were going to confront this entity, he wanted documentation. They tracked the rider to Hive Tertius, the manufacturing district where millions of workers labored in shifts that never ended. The air here tasted of reclaimed sweat and machine oil. Conveyor belts stretched for kilometers, producing las cells and flak armor for the endless war effort. Vok's auspex pinged. Heat signature. Massive. Moving fast. The roar came first, a sound like 1,000 damned souls screaming through an engine block. Then the light. Hellfire orange and spectral blue, casting shadows that moved wrong. The rider emerged from a side passage, the motorcycle beneath it leaving trails of flame that didn't consume the metal floor, but burned with an intensity that made reality itself shimmer. "Open fire," Vok commanded. Las bolts lanced through the air. Bolt rounds from Sister Helene's squad exploded against where the rider should have been. All of it passed through the figure as if it were smoke, yet the entity remained solid. Real, terrifyingly present. The rider stopped, turned. Those empty eye sockets filled with hellfire focused on Vok's force. Then it spoke. Not with words, but with a voice that bypassed ears entirely and burned directly into minds. "Judge yourself." Interrogator Sarn dropped to his knees, screaming. 2 guardsmen collapsed, their lasguns clattering to the deck. Sister Helene stood firm, her faith a shield, but even she staggered. Vok felt it. Every harsh interrogation, every order that sent soldiers to die, every compromise made in the Emperor's name. His sins laid bare, weighed, measured. But he was Inquisitor of the Holy Ordos. He had authorization for his actions, divine mandate. He gritted his teeth and remained standing. "I am Inquisitor Kazian Vok, acting under the authority of the Emperor himself. You will—" The rider simply rode past them, its motorcycle leaping impossible distances, heading deeper into the hive. It wasn't interested in them, not yet. It had other prey. Governor Callus's private enforcers found the rider at the main transit junction leading to the noble quarters. 50 men in carapace armor, with hell guns, positioned behind barricades. They'd been told a chaos insurgent was approaching. They'd been promised double pay. The rider came through the checkpoint like a meteor. Chains of hellfire shot from its hands, wrapping around enforcers, dragging them forward to face judgment. Those who'd killed innocents for pleasure burned. Those who'd followed orders but maintained their humanity found themselves passed by, left trembling but alive. The distinction was surgical, terrifying. By the time Vok's team caught up, 23 enforcers were ash, 27 were alive, traumatized but breathing. "It's judging them," Sarn whispered, his psychic senses raw. A new roar split the air. Not hellfire engines, bolt cannons. 3 Space Marines of the Subjugators chapter descended from a Thunderhawk, their crimson plate gleaming. Brother Captain Theron landed with a thud that cracked rockcrete. "Inquisitor, we received your call. Where is this entity?" Vok pointed toward the upper levels where flames flickered. "Captain, I must warn you. We are the Emperor's Angels of Death. We do not fear Xenos manifestations." The Astars advanced with typical confidence. Vok followed, watching as centuries of genetic enhancement met something that operated on different rules entirely. They found the rider in Governor Callus's auxiliary palace. The building burned, but papers remained untouched. Servitors continued functioning. Only the guilty burned. The rider stood in the central atrium, holding Callus by the throat. The governor screamed, tears streaming as he witnessed every bribe taken, every orphan sold, every loyal servant disappeared. "Release him!" Theron bellowed. The rider turned. Its gaze fell upon the Space Marines. The Astares stood unflinching as that burning stare washed over them. 3 warriors who'd served for centuries, who'd burned worlds for compliance, who'd killed millions in humanity's name. And the rider saw them as they truly were. Weapons, tools, not guilty of sin because they operated beyond such concepts. They were force personified, neither good nor evil, simply inevitable. The rider released Callus, letting him collapse. It turned back to the Space Marines, and something like recognition passed between them. "You are instruments, not judges. Continue your war." Then it was gone, passing through a wall like mist, leaving only brimstone and echoing chains. Brother Captain Theron stood silent. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an edge Vok had never heard from an Astaris: uncertainty. What in the Emperor's name was that? Vok approached the broken governor. The man would face imperial justice, trial, execution, but he'd already faced something far worse. His mind was shattered, his soul laid bare. "That," Vok said quietly, "was judgment without mercy or corruption. And Captain, it's heading for the planetary capital, where the real corruption lives." Theron's jaw tightened. "Then we follow it. If this thing is truly hunting the guilty—" He paused, a flicker of something crossing his scarred features. "The Imperium has many sinners." "That's what terrifies me," Vok replied. The rider reached the Cathedral of St. Macarius 3 days later, and by then, all of Malum Primus knew something was coming. The wealthy had fled off-world. The corrupt had barricaded themselves in fortified compounds. The innocent huddled in their habs, praying to the Emperor, while something older than prayer stalked the streets. Brother Captain Theron had requisitioned an entire company of subjugators, 90 Space Marines in full battle plate, deployed across the Cathedral District in strategic positions. If the rider could be stopped, this would be where it happened. But the rider wasn't alone anymore. Chaos had answered Abaddon's call. A warband of World Eaters had translated into the system. 40 cornate berserkers led by a champion named Bloodhand, each one a howling engine of slaughter wrapped in corrupted power armor. They'd made planetfall in drop pods that punched through the hive's upper levels like artillery shells. "Blood for the Blood God!" Bloodhand roared as his warriors charged through the cathedral square, chain axes revving. Citizens scattered, Arbites fired until they were overwhelmed. The World Eaters had one mission: find the rider and prove that chaos was the ultimate power in this galaxy. They found it at the cathedral steps. The rider stood motionless astride its burning motorcycle, hellfire casting dancing shadows across ancient stonework. The World Eaters formed a semicircle, their armor decorated with skulls and dried blood, their weapons dripping with fresh kills. Bloodhand stepped forward, his Terminator plate crackling with warp energy. "Spirit, demon, whatever you are, Khorne claims this world. Kneel or burn." The rider's skull turned slowly, regarding the Chaos Champion with those empty sockets that somehow saw everything. "You have killed 10,000 souls." 10,000, Bloodhand laughed, the sound wet and diseased. "Try 10 million. I have drowned worlds in blood. I have fed the Skull Throne with mountains of bone. What are you compared to the power of the dark gods?" The rider's voice came again, and this time it carried weight that made reality crack. "Guilty." Hellfire chains erupted from the rider's hands, wrapping around Bloodhand before he could react. The Chaos Champion was dragged forward, his Terminator armor screeching as it was pulled like paper. The rider's burning gaze locked onto his eyes. The penance stare. Bloodhand screamed, not the battle cry of a warrior or the roar of a berserker. This was the sound of a soul experiencing every murder it had committed, every innocent butchered, every atrocity celebrated. 10 million deaths, 10 million moments of terror and pain, all reflected back, all felt simultaneously. The World Eater's champion's armor split open from the inside. Hellfire consumed him from within, burning away the demonic gifts, the blessings of Khorne, the mutations that had sustained him for centuries. What remained was barely recognizable as human, a husk of ash and bone that crumbled to dust. The other berserkers attacked as one. What followed wasn't a battle, it was an execution. Chain axes bounced off the rider as if striking adamantium. Plasma fire passed through without effect. One berserker tried to grapple the entity directly and ignited like a torch, his screams echoing across the square as his sins consumed him from within. The rider moved through them like fire through parchment. Each touch was judgment, each glance was damnation. These warriors who'd terrorized the galaxy for millennia, who'd bathed in the blood of innocence and laughed at suffering, found themselves facing something that couldn't be killed, couldn't be corrupted, and absolutely would not stop. From his vantage point 300 meters away, Brother Captain Theron watched through his helmet's optics. Sister Helene stood beside him, her bolt pistol lowered, forgotten. "They're cornate berserkers," she whispered. "They know no fear. They cannot break." But they were breaking. The World Eaters weren't retreating, they were fleeing. Those that could still move scrambled away from the rider, their courage shattered by something their chaos-addled minds couldn't comprehend. Judgment without corruption, power without bargaining, vengeance without end. "It's purging them," Theron said, his voice tight. "It's not just killing, it's burning the chaos out of their souls before it destroys them. I've never seen anything do that. Not even the Grey Knights achieve this level of purity in their executions." Within minutes, 40 World Eaters were reduced to ash and memory. The rider stood alone in the cathedral square, surrounded by the remains of Chaos Marines who'd thought themselves invincible. Its burning skull turned upward towards the subjugators' positions. "Chaos is guilty. The Imperium is guilty. All are guilty. But judgment comes for those who embrace damnation willingly." Theron felt those words in his chest. The distinction was crucial. The Imperium committed horrors, yes, but in service to humanity's survival. Chaos committed horrors for pleasure, for power, for the joy of corruption itself. The rider wasn't here to judge the galaxy's harsh necessities. It was here to punish those who'd chosen evil when other paths existed. "Captain," one of his battle brothers voxed, "what are your orders?" Theron watched as the rider mounted his motorcycle, preparing to continue its hunt. He thought of every corrupt official, every sadistic overseer, every traitor hiding behind imperial authority while serving only their own cruelty. "We let it hunt," he said finally. "The Emperor punishes heretics through us. Perhaps this spirit is another instrument of divine will. Either way, any enemy of chaos is currently an ally of humanity." The rider roared away into the night, leaving only hellfire and justice in its wake. Comment your theories below. What corruption stalks our galaxy next? The final confrontation came not in battle, but in silence. Inquisitor Voke found the rider in the Sanctum Imperialis, the highest point of Malum Primus, where the planetary governor's throne room overlooked billions of souls. The space was empty now, abandoned by those who'd ruled through fear and corruption. Only Voke remained, his retinue stationed outside. This conversation needed to happen alone. The rider stood before the great stained glass window depicting the Emperor's ascension, its burning skull reflected in colored light. Up close, Voke could see the details, the chains that wrapped around its leather coat, the hellfire that didn't consume but judged, the machine that existed partially in another dimension. "Why are you here?" Voke asked simply. "In this galaxy, in this time?" The rider turned. When it spoke, its voice was quieter now, almost contemplative. "Every universe has sin. Every reality needs judgment. Your warp called out, across the void between dimensions. Such concentrated evil, such suffering. The Chaos Gods brought you here? They opened a door they cannot close. They thought I was like them, a daemon, a parasite feeding on emotion. They were wrong." Voke understood then. The ruinous powers had sensed something powerful in another reality, tried to pull it through, to corrupt it, to add it to their eternal game. Instead, they'd invited something antithetical to their nature, a spirit of vengeance that couldn't be bargained with or corrupted. "You've killed hundreds, heretics, traitors, corrupt officials. But this is the Imperium of man. We number in the quadrillions. If you judged every guilty soul in this galaxy, you'd burn for 10,000 years and never finish." "I know." The admission hung in the air. The rider understood the scope of what it faced. The Imperium was built on bones. Every piece of technology, every spaceship, every weapon was paid for in suffering. The tithes that kept humanity alive were extracted through brutality. The machine that protected mankind from extinction was fueled by cruelty. Then what's the point? Voke challenged. You can't save this galaxy. You can't even make a dent in its corruption. You're one spirit against an ocean of sin. The rider's gaze turned back to the stained glass window, to the depiction of the Emperor's ascension. Your corpse god understands. He sits on his throne, burning slowly, holding back the darkness. He cannot win, he cannot rest, but he endures because someone must. Voke felt his breath catch. The comparison was apt. The Emperor couldn't defeat chaos. He could only hold the line, day after day, millennium after millennium, sustained by sacrifice and suffering, not because victory was possible, but because the alternative was annihilation. You're like him, Voke whispered. Another instrument of judgment that can't stop, even knowing it won't be enough. Every monster I burn is one less preying on the innocent. Every corrupt official I judge is one less selling children for profit. I cannot save your species, but I can make the predators fear the night. Outside, reality began to tear. Voke felt it through his inquisitorial senses, the warp opening, the chaos gods realizing their mistake, trying to pull the rider back out of this dimension before it could do more damage. The entity they'd summoned wasn't destroying the Imperium. It was destroying their own cults, their own champions, their own carefully cultivated corruption. The rider mounted its motorcycle, the engine roaring to life with hellfire and chains. Tell your brother captain something. The Astoraves are weapons, yes, but weapons can rust. Tell him to remember why he fights, not for glory, not for honor, but for the billions who cannot fight for themselves. Wait, Voke said. Will you return? If the warp opens again? If chaos calls you back? I go where vengeance is needed. Your galaxy will call again. It always does. The rider accelerated, driving straight into the tear in reality. For just a moment, Voke saw beyond. Other worlds, other battles, other spirits of vengeance fighting their own endless wars. The rider was part of something larger, a cosmic force that existed across infinite realities, judging the guilty wherever evil flourished. Then the portal sealed, and Voke was alone in the empty throne room. Brother Captain Theron found him there an hour later. Inquisitor, we detected a warp incursion. The entity? Gone, Voke said. For now. But Theron, it left you a message. He relayed the rider's words. The Space Marine stood silent, processing. Finally, he nodded. My chapter has grown harsh in recent years. We've forgotten that our purpose isn't domination, it's protection. He looked at Voke. Perhaps this visitation was the Emperor's will after all, a reminder of what we're supposed to be. Voke walked to the window, looking out over the hive. Already, the power vacuum left by the rider's purge was being filled. New officials, new merchants, some better than the old ones, some just as corrupt. The machine of the Imperium ground on, as it always did. But somewhere in the Underhive, a gang leader paused before ordering an execution, remembering burning skulls and hellfire chains. A corrupt official hesitated before accepting a bribe, the memory of judgment too fresh. Fear had entered the equation. Not fear of the Arbites or the Inquisition, but fear of something that saw directly into souls. It wouldn't last. Humanity's capacity for evil was boundless. But for now, for this moment, the predators walked more carefully in the dark. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. This has been the galaxy's truth for 10,000 years. But for a brief, blazing moment, there was something else. There was judgment. The rider's passage through Malum Primus lasted only 7 days, but its impact resonated far beyond that single world. Inquisitor Voke's report was classified at the highest levels, marked with seals that ensured only the most senior members of the Ordos would ever read it. The Subjugators chapter recorded the incident in their private archives, a reminder to future generations of what they witnessed, power that operated outside the Imperium's understanding of reality. The Chaos warbands that survived carried stories back to the Eye of Terror, stories of a judge that couldn't be corrupted, a spirit that burned away the gifts of the dark gods themselves. Abaddon ordered those stories suppressed, but you cannot unspeak truth among creatures who feed on emotion. The Chaos cults grew cautious, looking over their shoulders in the darkness, wondering if those burning eyes might find them next. But perhaps the rider's greatest impact was on the guilty who survived. Those who'd looked into that flaming skull and felt the weight of their sins, yet lived because their evil hadn't crossed the final threshold. They were changed. Some reformed, dedicating themselves to redemption they'd never believed possible. Others doubled down on their cruelty, desperate to prove they weren't afraid. But all of them knew, deep in their souls, that somewhere in the infinite darkness between realities, something was watching, something that remembered, something that would return. Brother Captain Theron instituted reforms in his chapter. The Subjugators would still bring worlds to compliance through force. That was their nature, their purpose. But they would remember the distinction the rider had made between necessary force and cruelty for its own sake, between weapons serving a cause and monsters wearing Imperial colors. Inquisitor Voke continued his work hunting heretics and purging corruption as he always had. But now, when he interrogated the guilty, he sometimes saw that flicker of hellfire in their eyes, the memory of judgment that transcended mortal authority. It made his job easier in some ways, harder in others, because he'd seen the truth that the Imperium tried so desperately to hide. Everyone was guilty of something. The only question was degree. The Emperor, entombed upon his golden throne, perhaps understood what had transpired better than anyone. For he too was a being of immense power, judging humanity through his Inquisition, his Space Marines, his endless machinery of faith and war. Perhaps he recognized a kindred spirit in the rider, another force doing what must be done, not because victory was possible, but because the alternative was unthinkable. The warp still churned with chaos. The Tyranids still devoured from beyond the galactic rim. The Orcs still waged their eternal war. The machinery of the Imperium still ground human lives into paste to fuel its survival. Nothing fundamental had changed in the galaxy's balance of power. But in the underheaves and dark places, in the moments before corrupt officials signed orders of execution, in the hesitation before gang lords ordered atrocities, there was now a new fear. Not of the Arbites, not of the Inquisition, but of judgment that came on chains of hellfire, from eyes that saw the truth of your soul. The writer was gone, pulled back through the dimensional barrier by forces that regretted ever opening that door. But doors, once opened, can be opened again. And in a galaxy that produced fresh sin every microsecond, where evil was policy and cruelty was doctrine, where billions suffered so that trillions might survive, the call for vengeance would inimitably sound again. Somewhere across the infinite void between realities, a spirit of vengeance rode through other dimensions, judging other guilty souls, fighting other endless wars. But it remembered the 41st millennium. It remembered the Imperium of man, that vast machine of necessary evil and desperate survival. And when the time came, when the guilty grew too bold and the call became too strong to ignore, those hellfire eyes would open again in the darkness. The Emperor protects those who serve him faithfully, but for those who corrupt his Imperium from within, who prey on the innocent while wearing the Aquila, who embrace evil when better paths exist, there is another force watching, another judgment waiting. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But now, there is also vengeance. If this tale of cosmic judgment meeting the 41st millennium stirred something within you, the archives hold countless more stories from the dark millennium. Subscribe and let the Emperor's light guide you through the darkness. For in the grim future, there are always more tales to tell, more horrors to face, and more heroes to remember.